Section 1, Observations and Potential Concerns from the Form A Filing and Exhibits. 1. As noted during our initial conversation with the department, the acquiring party, Mr. Greg Lindberg, and the related companies are receiving heavy attention from numerous state insurance regulators. The department should consider the results of these other regulatory requests and matters before concluding on this Form A filing. 2. We have developed a number of distinct observations based on receipt of the Form A filing, specifically, the Mr. Lindberg financial statements, as detailed in Section 2 of this executive summary. 3. There is a significant amount of related party and intercompany activity noted within the global bankers' affiliated companies, including the insurance companies. This was noted within the various financial statements provided. As a result, related party fee activity appears to be obscured by the structure and policies of global bankers and Mr. Lindberg. There is a possibility that some of the smaller Lindberg controller companies are heavily dependent on related party fees paid by the insurance companies. For example, Southland National Insurance Company paid $183,970 to Eli Research and $301,975 to Academy Association Incorporated, although the North Carolina Department of Insurance was unable to evidence support for these fees as noted in the 2015 examination report. Many of Mr. Lindberg's personal holdings are service companies. This increases the risk that related party activity could account for a portion, or perhaps most, of the reported revenues. In addition to potentially misleading financial reporting, the related party investments controlled by Mr. Lindberg may increase concentration risk, liquidity risk, and default risk. Financial statements for Mr. Lindberg were provided for the years ended December 31, 2012 through December 31, 2016. During his time frame we noted certain trends. Mr. Lindberg's net worth increased from $140 million to $1,043 million, or an increase of 645%. This significant increase is primarily due to the increase in investments in closely held businesses. These investments are 100% Level 3 investments, meaning the fair value is based on unobservable inputs. It is therefore hard to ascertain how these valuations were derived and if they are based on underlying audited financial statements or some other source. Ultimately, it is difficult to understand the null nature of these investments. Therefore, we believe these unobservable values may be determined by Mr. Lindberg and should not be relied upon without further financial statement analysis, as discussed in Section 2 of this executive summary. Further, the NCDOI had a similar observation during their examinations of Colorado Bankers Life Insurance Company and SNC. As such, we understand the NCDOI requested further information regarding these investments to better understand Mr. Lindberg's financial position. Mr. Lindberg had significant personal debt and certain guarantees in place. Specifically, Mr. Lindberg's debt increased from $115 million to $581 million, or an increase of 405%. Liquid assets, cash and cash equivalent, were $19 million and $150 million as of December 31, 2012 and 2016, respectively, which is not significant to his overall net worth. Further, we noted that the $150 million as of December 31, 2016 is a round and very even number, which could indicate an issue with attention to detail on exact numbers versus rounded ones, as well as raise questions as to the level of supporting evidence to justify Mr. Lindberg's net worth. Mr. Lindberg's investment in American Academy Holdings increased from $236 million as of December 31, 2012 to $1,001 million as of December 31, 2016. This is a significant increase in value in only 4 years. In addition, RRC's high-level review of the equity of Southland National Holdings Incorporated for 2016 noted equity of $68 million, although Mr. Lindberg's financial statements noted Southland Holdings' fair market value of $135 million. In addition to what is described above, this disconnect seems to further illustrate the need for additional understanding of the valuations for the closely held businesses that could be needed as part of this review of the Form Filing A. The inclusion of Mr. Lindberg's personal financial statements in this Form A filing has allowed us to relate the Vista loan activity made directly to middle-market companies listed as assets controlled and owned by Mr. Lindberg. For instance, The Ability Insurance Company sell within Vista made an $18.1 million loan to American Academy Holdings. A report by FTI Consulting, paid for by global bankers, indicates that 100% of the Vista's loan investments have served as the debt portion of Eli Global and Global Bankers acquisitions. Mr. Lindberg's December 31, 2016 personal financial statements list as the largest middle market holding, valued at $1 billion or 93% of his net worth. We suggest a detailed review of the financial statements of A. On a related note, we further recommend that Vista management be held accountable to explaining why an apparently independent reinsurance company would invest 100% of its assets with Mr. Lindberg. The Vista LLC that made the loan appears to be one of many such instances, so we anticipate a need to track activity back to Mr. Lindberg's personal holdings. A discussion with Vista management would help assess the character and trustworthiness of Mr. Lindberg. Given our initial review of Mr. Lindberg's personal financial statements, we believe most, if not all, of the middle market companies listed as his personal assets have likely been funded by insurance companies. Review of the underlying financial statements per Mr. Lindberg's financial statements would allow for an objective assessment of hard assets, if any, and ability to repay the insurance company loans. It would also allow for a view of the aggregate related party fee activity, as we can relate the principal loan and investment amounts from insurance companies to assets still on the balance sheet. A concern is that Mr. Lindberg could be using the principal obtained from insurance companies like Vista for related party fees, expenses, and funding acquisitions. The only source of repayment to the insurance companies is the middle market portfolio of investments that Mr. Lindberg financial statements indicates is worth $2 billion. It also appears his investment portfolio may have been built up quickly using insurance company assets. As a result, we suggest a thorough review of Mr. Lindberg's middle market investment portfolio as requirement and contingency of any Form A approval to moving ahead. The acquiring party and Mr. Lindberg have implemented a unique business model. Some observations about this approach include, as described more fully in Bullet 9 above, middle market loans and investments appear to be based on cash flow analysis developed by Mr. Lindberg himself. Bankers typically refer to this strategy as air lending or story credit. This type of analysis, however, contradicts a margin of safety for policyholders aligned with statutory accounting concepts. We understand that Mr. Lindberg has asserted to regulators that he can cede his investments to J.P. Morgan or other third parties. However, we have observed that some of the investments are below investment grade and therefore are considered to be riskier investments. Some of these privately held middle market companies may not be audited and may not be admitted assets under U.S. SAP. Mr. Lindberg has substantial related party investments funded by various insurance companies. These investments total well over $2 billion based on Mr. Lindberg's December 31, 2016 financial statements. These are companies that are rated by Egan-Jones and do not appear to be audited by an independent outside source. In summary, lack of transparency, along with lack of collateral, appears as though it may be significant concern with regards to this privately held portfolio of investments, which is under Mr. Lindberg's control. Normal or expected corporate governance processes do not appear to be in place related to Mr. Lindberg's companies or in certain instances, those over which he may have influence. Further, management does not appear to be independent of Mr. Lindberg. A first example is noted within the NCDOI management for CBL, where the NCDOI noted that executive management has no representation on the board of directors. As such, there is a risk that the appropriate level of management oversight may not present. A second example is related to Mr. Lindberg's dealing with Vista. As noted from discussions with the Pennsylvania Insurance Department, although Mr. Lindberg has indicated that he does not own Vista, it appears that he does have a level of control over this company as he was able to make decisions regarding its assets. As a result, we understand the Pennsylvania Insurance Department is looking to understand this further. We suggest the department also perform further inquiries to understand how Mr. Lindberg may be controlling Vista.